Hello everyone! In this video, I'm going to be telling you my 7 steps on how to start your very own podcast. So hey, welcome back to Farm Traveler. I'm Trevor. If you're not new here, consider subscribing. We cover all sorts of stuff, farming, food, podcasting, so subscribe. So in today's video, I want to talk about an episode I released a couple of weeks ago, talking about my 7 steps for creating your very own podcast. Now, this isn't a funnel to lead you to a course that I have or to buy something, as you'll find numerous times online for creators that have a podcast or all that good stuff. This is just 7 free tips and tricks on how you can start your own podcast, how easy it is, what are some of the more harder things. I've been doing this for about 3 years. I've interviewed people all over the United States, Australia, Canada, the UK, done almost 175 episodes. I think this week it was 162, so it's quite a bit. Learned a little bit in that time, so I figured I'd pass along 7 tips and tricks I have. So let's just go ahead and get into it. All right, so step number 1 is pretty obvious. You need to pick a niche. Now, not everybody can be like Joe Rogan, where they talk about literally everything. Most of us are starting out with not a following or maybe a little following. We don't have millions of people that know us. That's different from like celebrities that already have their name established, like NFL stars, movie stars, and they can talk about pretty much whatever with whoever on their shows. They already have a following, but you might not. So you need to pick a niche. An example one, which I have in an article on my website, which is kind of covering these 7 steps, that will be in the description below. But a great example is, let's say you wanted to start a real estate podcast. That's still kind of broad. I'm here in Panama City, Florida. So let's say I wanted to start a Panama City real estate podcast. That's great. It's still a little bit too broad. So maybe real estate for dummies in Panama City. Not too bad. That's very specific. So you want to find exactly who might listen to your podcast, exactly who you want to listen to your podcast. A lot of people say like you need to come up with a listener avatar, which is your ideal listener. You can do that, totally up to you. Not really something I recommend, but the most important thing, number 1, pick a niche before you start actually doing your show. Number 2 is pick a format. So after you have your show niche decided, you obviously need to pick some sort of format. Is it going to be interview based? Is it going to be story based? Think of podcasts like Serial, which I believe they have like crime drama. And so they kind of write their episodes kind of like a TV show where it's scripted. You can interview people if you want, totally up to you, totally up to how they do their show, but it's different. Then you have other shows, like I listen to a guy, his name is Tom Rowland. He has a fishing podcast. And I believe on Tuesdays, he does how-to tips and tricks on his podcast about how to do fishing in, saltwater, freshwater, stuff like that. Then on, I believe Thursdays or Wednesdays, he has his normal interview where he's interviewing somebody in the fitness world, in the saltwater fishing world, in the guide fishing world, stuff like that. And then on Fridays, he has fitness advice. So that's kind of cool. He has 3 different topics he covers throughout the week, but he spaces them out very well, and that's just kind of how they do. So you can have 1 episode a week, you can have 2 episodes a week, you can have an interview format, totally up to you. Just kind of find what works for your show, and also kind of think about what would make it unique. What's something out there that hasn't been done before? What can kind of set you apart from other shows out there? So that's something to think about. Number 2, pick a show format. Number 3, this is kind of obvious, but number 3, you actually need to record your episodes. You can do that a number of different ways. If you're doing it solo, you can use GarageBand, you can use Adobe Audition, you can use Audacity. Adobe Audition is what I use, and it's fantastic. I highly recommend you use that. If you are doing an interview-based show where you're interviewing somebody maybe virtually, you can use things like Zoom. You can use things like Zencastr, maybe Riverside FM. Some of those are paid. Zoom is pretty good. Everybody uses Zoom, so everybody knows how to use it, but the audio quality kind of sucks. So I recommend using Zencastr. It's super easy, and best of all, it's free. And the only downside is that it works only on desktop, Chrome, and Firefox web browser. It doesn't work on your mobile. It doesn't have an app like Zoom, but the audio quality is fantastic. So I highly recommend using that. You can also use Riverside FM and other paid versions. Great audio there, but you're going to look at like 20, 25, 30 bucks a month maybe for something like that. So use Zencastr. Or If you're cool and you're doing something in person, get some microphones. You don't have to have anything super crazy. I have this Blue Yeti, as you can see here, that I got off of Amazon for like $120 3 years ago. It's great. It's got settings where I can just record myself, people on either side of the microphone, or there's even a setting on here where I can record like 5 or 6 people around the microphone. That's awesome. You can buy microphones on Amazon for $20, $30, $40. You can even buy ones for $400, but I don't really recommend that. You can also record stuff on your phone. I believe Anchor is an app that you can download on your phone and record it and upload everything on there. And it's free, I believe. And if you have to do it, it's very relatively affordable if you have to do a paid subscription for it. So super easy. Obviously, number 3, you got to record your episode. So get started. Number 4 is where podcasting sort of gets a little bit confusing, and that is pick a podcast hosting site. So in order for your episodes to get on things like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, everything else, you have to upload it to a website that manages that for you. There are a bunch of different ones like Libsyn, Buzzsprout, Megaphone. Some are free, some aren't. Some allow you to place ads in there, some don't. A very easy one that I actually started off with is Buzzsprout, and they have a free tier, but for the free tier, your audio is only up for about 30 to 60 days, I believe, until you have to pay, I think like $5 a month or something like that. And you can upload, I think with the paid version, maybe 5 hours a month, which isn't bad. So look around, shop around for exactly what's going to fit your needs, how much content you're actually going to be uploading, how much you're willing to spend, stuff like that. So basically, you will upload your finished episode on there, and then it will distribute it to all the podcasting directories like Apple, Spotify, stuff like that. There are a plethora of videos here on YouTube and elsewhere on the internet that can show you how to upload your podcast. Go check that out. I don't really encourage you to go pay for a course because you don't really need it. There's a bunch of free content out there about how to do all this stuff, so just do some research and you can figure out great ideas on how to publish your show and how it works within the site. So that's number 4, pick a podcast hosting site. Number 5, plan a launch and a marketing strategy. Very simple. Obviously, you need to have some sort of cool event, some sort of cool launch and marketing strategy so people can know about your podcast. In terms of a launch, here's what I suggest. It's what I did, and it's what I'm recommending for 2 podcasts that I'm producing. Have a trailer, like 30, 45 seconds to a minute, talking about you and what the show is going to do. Make it relatable. Like, why should the listeners listen to you? What do you bring to the show, and what are the shows going to look like? Very simple. Then your second things, you have the trailer. I recommend you go ahead and publish your first and second episode as well. Maybe that first week, because that way when you have new people that are listening, they can go ahead and get 2 episodes down and listen to you and see what your show is going to be like, and go ahead and be like, hey, I like this content, or maybe I don't like this content and I'm not going to listen. That's totally fine too. So upload a trailer and then have at least 2 episodes up. You can maybe get away with 1, maybe even 3 or 4, but that's a lot of work in the beginning. So just start with the trailer and then 2 episodes, and then plan a marketing strategy. Marketing a podcast drives me nuts because there's no perfect way to do it. There are people that say, oh, Instagram is perfect, Facebook is perfect, Twitter is perfect. No, there's nothing perfect for marketing a podcast, because when you're listening to a podcast, the best way is to go on another show to market for your podcast, which is kind of confusing. But in terms of marketing, start with social media. Start with your own social media channels, and if you want to create new social media channels for your podcast, try Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, and really just find what works for you and your audience. If Twitter doesn't work out, that's fine, don't use Twitter. If Facebook works out, great, use Facebook, totally up to you. And then always be consistent, and I highly recommend whatever social media platform you go to, try to find like an influencer that can give you ideas, tips, tricks and stuff on how to gain followers, how to get the word out there. I'm following a couple on Instagram which are really handy. They also offer courses which I haven't bought yet. I'm just following them for other free content, and their free content's been very, very helpful. So do that. I'm on Instagram, for example, with Farm Traveler, and I'll do reels, Instagram videos, posts and stuff like that. So some get a lot of traction, some don't get a lot of traction. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. And also in terms of marketing, try to guest on other podcasts. Now, not just let's say I have my Panama City real estate podcast. I'm not going to go on a sport podcast in Seattle. That makes no sense. I would go on a real estate podcast in Tallahassee, maybe. Go on podcasts where your ideal listener might also be there, where you go on a podcast that shares a topic like yours, and you can bring in listeners from other shows that are maybe looking for your specific niche. So totally up to you. I highly recommend you go on other podcasts, email them, try to find them on social media, go on other podcasts, be like, hey, I'd love to do an episode swap. If I can come on your podcast, I'd like to have you on mine. Totally up to you on how you do that. It's a little difficult at times. Sometimes you won't hear from people, but that's totally okay. Every 10 people you reach out to, maybe you'll actually go on one podcast. That's totally fine. That's about how the ratio works. So number 5, plan a launch and market your show. Easier said than done. All right, number 6 is plan, organize, and stay consistent. Most podcasts fail because the host stops uploading, or maybe they upload inconsistently. So if you release every week, if you release every 2 weeks, make sure you stick to that time frame. Make sure that listeners know that, oh, Wednesday mornings, I want to listen to the Farm Traveler podcast. Every Wednesday, they can listen to a new episode. Now, stuff happens where sometimes you'll miss an upload. Maybe you don't have one interviewed. That's totally fine. You can always rebroadcast older episodes. I've done that countless times, and those perform really, really well. Usually I'll record an intro and say something like, hey, this is an older episode from a year ago. I thought you might enjoy it. Here we go. Totally fine. Big podcasts do that. One of my favorite is The Art of Manliness from Brett McKay, and he does that consistently. Like, I'd say maybe once a quarter or something when he goes on vacation or something, or maybe it's a cool episode that is very relevant today. So you can always do that. Don't be afraid to do that, but don't upload an episode you had a month ago numerous times. Like, just kind of give it some breathing room, and when you have new listeners that might enjoy an older episode, go ahead and rebroadcast it. Totally fine. So that's number 6, plan, organize, and stay consistent. And number 7, lastly, when it comes to all my tips and tricks for podcasting, don't be afraid to try new things. Whether it's a marketing strategy, or maybe you want to have new intro music, you want to have new types of guests on, totally fine. Find a new way to bring new life into your show, try new things, but also don't do it too much where your audience is going to be like going back and forth, like at a tennis match, where they're like, oh, cool, new content. Oh, cool, new content. Like, they're going crazy. But try it every now and then. Maybe every quarter, every 6 months or something like that. Just try new things to keep your audience on their toes, and maybe make, exciting new content for new listeners to find you. Kind of cool. So those are my 7 tips and tricks for podcasting. I hope you found them enjoyable. If you want to read them, if you want to listen to the podcast episode where I talk about them kind of more in depth, go in the description here for this video. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, let me know in the comments below here on YouTube. And let's talk about it. Like, what are some things that you think you should do for your podcast? What are some things you've tried if you already have one? What worked? What didn't work? Let's have a conversation. Let me know what you think. If you found this helpful, consider giving it a thumbs up. Or if you didn't find it helpful, give me a thumbs down. That's fine too, but prefer the thumbs up. So thanks for watching. See you in the next video. See you later. Bye. See ya.